Kia ora iti, we welcome back again, amazing kōrero we've been listening to this morning, so let's move right along to our next speaker, a whanaunga of ours, Dr. Jani Wilson. Now, Dr. Jani hails from Pāroa on the outskirts of Whakatāne. She has a PhD in film, television and media studies from the University of Auckland and is currently an independent researcher in screen arts studies. Homai te piki paki paki, Dr. Jani Wilson. Kia ora whā, love to see you. Welcome back.
I'm so out of practice. Morena. Morena rai te iwi. Me? I'm missing the cues, fellas. E mihi tuatahi ki te matua nui i te rangi mō mātou haumaru haringa ki tēnei wahi i tēnei rā, tēnā koe. He mihi tuarua ki ngā tangata o tēnei whenua, ngā tangata o Ngāti Whātua o Rākei. Mā, pēr, tēnā rātou, tēnā koutou pēr. He mihi tuatoru ki o koutou, ngā kairongo, mai tā wāhi, me huri ki tēnei, te poho o tēnei whare tino a tāhua hari ko te ngākau i tēnei rā. Me mihi aroha ki a koutou katoa. Ko wai ahau ki te taha o tāku kraua, he uriau no te rohe o te waka o mā tātua, ko Ngāti Awa te iwi matua ki reira, ko tūhoi, ko te whakatohea me te upokorehe, nā iwi hoki, me Ngāti Mania poto, hoki. Tahuri au ki te taha o taku kuia, he uri au no te whare tapu o Ngāpuhi, me te kōpua a Hene Amaru, ko Rahiri te tangata ki reira, ko Ora Māhoi te marae, ko Jani Katarina Taituha Wilson tōku ingoa. Kia ora everybody, I speak English real good too. So a disclaimer, so I am not attached to an institution at the moment, so I don't get Microsoft. I can't afford Microsoft, so I try to be flash and I try to use Canva. And I tāhaid a whole lot of footage from unnamed places and I tried to attach them to Canva, not knowing that I had to pay for Canva in order to send it to Marcos. So aroha mai, there was some very beautiful movement on these slides and now there's not. So I'm just going to tell you, trust me, it did look really cool. I am going to speak about a little methodology that I've been working on for about, 15 years, called Rōpū Whānau. So Rōpū Whānau are basically just familial amalgamations or groups or whatnot. Yeah, it's something that I'm using currently. These people were all doing haka, and now they're just static images, aroha mai. So deeply steeped in mātauranga Māori, kapahaka is a way of simultaneously exemplifying Māori histories, the present, and our future. It is also acknowledged as a community-focused cultural practice, methodology, and pedagogy. Contemporary kapahaka, both whakataitai, that's competition, and whakangaho, which is entertainment, fosters, develops, validates, and celebrates te ao Māori, te reo rangatira, and kaupapa Māori and kaupapa iwi. So those are the ways that we roll as Māori and also in our tribal affiliations as well. Arguably, kapahaka is part of the fundamental building blocks of Māori popular culture, whatever that is. This research, and the research is a Marsden-funded project called Kia Rite, which is kapahaka for screens, which I have just recently won. So this particular project isn't as well developed as some of these very flash PhD students. And of course our amazing professors, who I know that I'm just a curtain raiser for. But this this presentation, I'll just be looking at the purposes, aims and objectives, and also some elements of the Rōpū Whānau. And then I'll get into the when I have used it in the past and what I hope to do with it. So, so the research will focus on the influence and impact of screen production on the art of kapa haka and the conflicts between maintaining traditions and exploring innovation in and towards te ao hurihuri, or the changing world. So over the last century, the kapa haka art form has evolved exponentially, and as the project will explore, in large part as a response to the advancement of screen technologies. So very few projects explore Māori and screen production, and although there are various publications about kapa haka and te whare tāpere, or the performance house, only some have been written by kaihaka, and there are just a handful of historical overviews. So the research will be the first to invite kaihaka to transition their profound knowledge in composition and performance of kapa haka into the academic research and study, and to marry together theory and practice. So focusing on screened kapa haka, screened whakataetai kapa haka in particular, the project consists of two distinct threads, which will help us understand pivotal historical production and performance shifts to help cartograph our way forward into this art form, discipline, and of course haka is also a way of life. The first strand utilises a combination of mahi toi analysis and a production analysis tool designed specifically for the study of kapa haka, and I'll show you momentarily. It will note significant changes throughout history to the technology, so those are the various cameras and framing. So it used to be that kapa haka would have one stationary camera that was sort of like a, you know, anywhere between sort of 80 and 100 metres away from the stage, or a little elevated platform. And that was kind of the frame that it was held in, the whole, you know, performance was framed in. Whereas now you've got, you know, such close-ups where you can see tears, you can see sweat, when we have, you know, tāmoko vivided onto our bodies, you can see it kind of running. So it's a real shift in technological advancement that has allowed us to get so close to our kapa haka performers. It will also look at kākahu, the ways in which our performance costuming and appearance, there's a lot of like hair straightening now, fake tan, and in fact, one of the reasons why I started this kaupapa was because we were getting ready for the 2015, I think it was, regionals out in Ruatoki, and during training, my nieces, they said to me, "Oh, Aunt, are you going to get a, are you going to get fake tan? And are you going to get, are you going to wear contacts? Are you going to get fake nails?" And I was like, "Oh, why would I do that?" And they were like, "Oh, because we're going to be on the TV." And I thought, "Oh, true. Yes, that's true." And then also, moving on from that, as a kaiako, as a teacher, I also coach kapa haka. I found that I was actually coaching in a different way. So I would tell my girls, because I taught at a girls' school, I would tell my girls, more teeth, bigger eyes, hold that, you know. And they were like, "But Fire, we look stupid. Why would we do that?" And I was like, "You might get a close-up. So hold that." Also, I think a slide back, I had some footage of a team where during a waiata koroa or a mōteatea, someone had actually forgotten the words, and so they were kind of standing there like this. You know, they couldn't recite the words, and you would not get away with that now. So those are the other little things that have changed since there has been more production. Also the structure of the stage. You can see in those top ones, those are hui at Tiki Tiki in 1926. They didn't even have a stage, whereas now you have a really huge stage which garners more and different choreography, more microphones, more cameras, you know, and what you don't see in the back are the holding tents. You don't see the huge production that's going on in the back. So the structure of the stage and the choreography has changed, and also the change in two. Two is the way we stand, the way we hold ourselves, and also the changes in composition have changed as well. So those are some of the adaptations that I'll be looking at. So what this particular tier in the research will look at, using this tool, which I initially developed as part of another Marsden project by Melinda Webber. You can see that I'll be looking at what the kaupapa is. So some of them will be, Matua Robert actually produced some of the original, you did the Avondale racecourse one, eh, Uncle? Yeah, so how there was a Māori traditional performing arts will be the kaupapa, or you know what the event was, who they are, what rohe or region they represent, differences in two, the ways that they stylise themselves, but also the way that they hold themselves, and production notes, anything you know to do with like how many mics it could be assumed that they would have had, how many camera angles, how many, you know, those sorts of things. So this will form the basis of a decade by decade historical overview of screened kapahaka from early performances such as Tiki Tiki, the Waitangi Day celebrations in 1934, and the return of the Māori Battalion in 1946. So significantly, these performances were featured as part of events around rituals captured by producers, primarily as a means of displaying what the natives do in this part of the empire, whereas whakataetai kapahaka is the event. So the thread moves from such black and white silent recordings of Te Hoko Whetū next to the pyramids and so forth, through to the colourful dynamism of the Polynesian Festival, the Aotearoa traditional performing arts competition, and kapahaka performances on Koha, which Matua Robert also produced and directed, Waiora and Wakahuia, all the way through to the more recent behind the scenes haka life, haka nation, haka at home, 50 haka moments, and the satire, the ring-ins. And then tier 2 will investigate the relationships between the traditional and the innovative amongst a mātātua rohe kapahaka audience and whānau. So it will employ a refined iteration of Rōpū Whānau, which I developed in my PhD 1,000 years ago, a focus group methodology that I established specifically for linked whanaunga to respond to film, but I have adapted it to respond to kapahaka screenings as a generational screen audience study. So such an approach is fundamental to navigating kapahaka's potential future. So what I'll be doing for that is I'll be looking at audiences in the Ngāti Awa, Tūhoi, Pourangamoana, Te Whakatohea and Te Whānau Apanui regions. And there will be 5 generations at each of these hui. There will be the Te Kāhui Kaumātua, so they're 60 plus. Pākeke, so 30 to 64, which is where I fit into now. Rangatahi, 18 to 29. Taiohi, 10 to 17. And Pipi Paupau, who are under 9s. So I wanted to look at including children, the potential of including children for this, because during my PhD I looked at some films, and it would have been, I think, the differences between the way that the kaumātua and the rangatahi viewed were completely different. For example, when we watched the Te Kōti Trail, the queer kaumātua were more interested in how they might whakawhanaunatanga with that person on the screen, whereas the younger people were looking for the character. So if they, for instance, saw Mere Kingi, they'll be going, oh, that's Mere Kingi, oh, that's such and such as Nan, oh, did you see the gap in her teeth? Oh, I've got that gap in my teeth. You know, so having these kinds of discussions were completely different to the younger ones who were saying, oh, he's so white, he looks like Edward from Twilight. You know, so very, very different responses. but I'm wanting to use that in kia rite. So the importance of whakawhiti kōrero, and it's funny because when I was sitting there listening to Toi, a little hook came to me, which I will try to sing to you right now, and it's actually about this particular kaupapa, whakawhiti kōrero, and it goes something like this. E paku whakawhiti kōrero, hohonu ngā kupu rere atu, e rere mai, ngā kare aroto e. That's it. That's all I came up with. 3 lines. So anyway, whakawhiti kōrero. Whakawhiti kōrero are basically the crossing over and back, the exchange of talks. So sometimes when I have used this particular methodology, it has touched on some very uncomfortable truths. And they have been rich and complex and brave. And primarily I've worked hapu based, but I have also worked out in the community as well. Sometimes we've touched on some things like politics, racism, nepotism, sexism, you know, so it actually does open up some very interesting discussions that I think some researchers may not be au fait or have the effort to do so. For example, I was on a project up until a couple of weeks ago, and I was asked to ask particular questions, and the questions were, it was in connection with Māori, Pasifika and wahine in the create-tech industries and in tertiary education. And the questions I was asked to ask were things like, what factors do you think influences women's decisions to study creative technology at tertiary level? And I thought, well, that sounds really dull and really boring, and I probably would just give a really rushed response to that. Whereas if I asked something a lot more personable, and if I designed my questions that appeal to these people, where I'm not looking for an answer, I'm looking for a discussion. It might be something like, you are Māori, Pasifika, wahine, and you have or you are studying creative tech. Can you briefly talk us through your undergraduate experience and what mechanisms were put in place to ensure your success? Quite a different design of question. Another one, you completed or you did not complete your qualification, because I have spoken to a number of people who hadn't. In your opinion, what might the fundamental elements your education provider could have offered, or could offer future Māori, Pasifika, wahine students moving forward? Because all of these people that I spoke to had very mixed experiences of being in the industry and also studying create tech. Yeah, so those are the main, that's a main component of whakawhiti kōrero. But this is how I personally run my Rōpū Whānau. So the Rōpū Whānau are based around how, because I first did this in my own whānau, I had to do something that was going to be relevant and relative to them. Also, it could be predicted what was happening next, because I don't want them to have any surprises about what's going to come next. So these are just some of the elements. So that actually adds to the comfort levels of the people who are in the room. In the most recent iteration that I've done, we did it in one of our graduates' homes. There were 5 of us. And although I didn't do the himene, I did do the whakawhanaunatanga, karakia taki, kaupapa o te rā. Sometimes the kaupapa o te rā can take 2 hours. Sometimes I've actually had to stay overnight. But that is to delve into those hōhonu kupu. That what I'm trying to argue is that, you know, in research, sometimes they're too afraid to ask in those ways. I will be recruiting some very skilled facilitators who are most able to pick up on nuance and humour. I want all of our Rōpū Whānau to be you know, fun occasions, because there are going to be kids in the room, there are going to be taiohi, rangatahi and pipi paupau. I want them to remember that research is actually something that we do not as a chore or as a duty or an obligation. It's actually fun, because when we think about ranga hau, those are the threads of energy. So I'm wanting to ensure that the facilitators that we have, and we're going to have one in Tūhoi, one in Te Whakatōhea, one in Te Whanāpunu. Do you want a job? Okay. And Ngāti Awa and also Tauranga Moana, all of whom have been associated with me in some way. Yes, and I have used it in film audiences, and it's really rich and complex what comes out when you play a piece of footage. Everyone has something different to say. And that's probably why I've stuck with film for so long. In public health, I used Rōpū Whānau when I was working in public health as well. I worked in child poverty, smoking cessation and problem gambling. And one thing that happened when I was working in problem gambling was that I've only played lotto twice in my whole life. So, empowering the people who were in various stages of their rehabilitation, empowered them to be the experts in the room, because I had no clue. So that's just a little element of things that are really important to the skill of the facilitators. And I've worked with Māori, Pasifika and Wahine in Createch. I just sent in the report 10 days ago. And that was really interesting, because they are not shy about talking about how they've got a deep mamai, but they want to do better work for their communities. For example, one Tongan girl is actually developing an innovative thing called tsunami armour for Tongans. So in Tonga, of course, they experience tsunamis. So she's actually developing this thing that will help float people in a tsunami. But this girl was told, don't bring that to the classroom. She was told, that is too cultural. You have to leave your culture at the door. So that's just one of the challenges that we're dealing with, and that Rōpū Whānau and paku whakawhiti kōrero methodology can actually help us forward. And I try to recruit from whakapapa links, and yeah, that's how I kimi aku kai kōrero. And then there's also going to be, as part of the Marsden, I will be developing a rito kind of mentorship between myself and less experienced kai rangahau. So all of the kids that I will be, I'm only saying kids because I'm 46 now. I'm an old bag, and they're in their 20s. So they're kura kaupapa kids, and they are now researchers. So they are able to whakawhiti kōrero in te reo Māori and in English as well. So they are able to articulate themselves in double vernaculars. They are feisty, they are politically aware, they know what they want, they are savvy on technology. Whaia J is not. But we need to pay them for their skills. So conducting their Rōpū Whānau in te reo Māori, they can also translate into te reo English. And the other way, if they go in, like, for example, one of the kai rangahau is my daughter, and she will, if she chooses to do her, If she is able to do her Rōpū Whānau in te reo Māori, she will then translate it into English for the project. And we need to pay them handsomely because we are developing Kairangahau into our future. And I believe an Indigenous-led academic future. Right, so I am closing. And in closing, I wanted, what I want to do is I want to talk to these groups about our way forward. I want to talk to these Rōpū Whānau about how comfortable or uncomfortable they might be with the burgeoning of technology. Could I AI into kapahaka practice when I'm stuck in Samoa? How would I feel about a intergalactic te matatini where nobody is actually in Aotearoa but they meet somewhere in the stratosphere? So those are the things that I will be exploring in this particular kaupapa. Ko tēnei te whakamutunga o taku kauhau poto. Nō reira, huri no i tō mātou whare tino a tāhua, tēnā koutou, o tira, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Stay there, kia ora.
Oh, no.
Just one big question. And it's actually a beautiful one, so thank you for that kōrero. So this one's from Brazil, and it says, thank you for your presentation. It was a pity we couldn't see the videos. As someone with an Indigenous background, I found your presentation amazing, provocative, and many thoughts. Brazil has more than 3,000 Indigenous tribes, including more than 200 uncontacted. However, the colonization process was very cruel here, and there was not much sense of unity left on our tribes. Here, many of our young Indigenous people do not have the pride of being who they are, and there is high levels of disconnections, alcoholism, unemployment, and lack of perspective. Does kapahaka function like a guardian of old Māori traditions, transporting the customs, oral storytelling, and ancient knowledge? How do the young Māori feel in regards to kapahaka? Does kapahaka serve a way to motivate them to connect with their Indigenous ancestors?
Yes. That is a really good question. I'm going to use a little case study from my own child, who is 19, who came through kura kaupapa. She went to nationals with te kuro, te pārua. She's led, she's written, blah, 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 blah. This year, she's been at the University of Otago, and she was, in a way, forced away from her kapahaka. And I've seen her decline. And she's doing a little project with me at the moment about borrowed tunes for kapahaka, which I'm going to straight after this. I said to her a couple of weeks ago, because she's not getting out of bed until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said to her, Baba, I have to take you off this project. And she said, Mum, it's the only thing I can look forward to. I love kapahaka. It's what I live for. So I said to her, Baba, you can use that to help people, because you're not the only kapa kid who's not functioning as a kaihaka anymore. I'm so sorry. So it is a lifeline. It's a lifeline to our reo, to our tikanga. We put ourselves into the skin of our ancestors. That gives us hope. It also gives us a future to look forward to. Kapahaka is, to us, it is life. It sustains us. It keeps us strong. It is our identity. And so moving forward, I just hope that it can help people plot their future, because looking back in the way that the oral traditions teach us to is our only way forward. That is the academic future moving forward. It is the Indigenous-led academic future. Kapahaka is a huge explicit and implicit component of our way forward. Tēnā koutou katoa. Sorry, I'm getting off now.
Beautiful, beautiful, well done. Well done. Absolutely. Yeah, what a great way to end it. And I resonate with Manaki and what she's doing with kapa and the importance it plays in keeping us connected to know who we are.